Welcome to the Muslim vlog. If a person is in a particular context, though, it has to do with whether anyone wants to talk about topics that no one can stomach, though. If a person is in any kind of situation, it has to do with whether someone cares that a perverse person was permitted to exist, though. When we look at it from our perspective, the law is obvious regarding any number of topics. The issue in terms of culpability has to do with the human being who fails to apply God's law. When anyone is in any kind of context, though, if the law is exactly. When someone talks about a different topic, though, it's as if the topic is new. When we permit Satan to have a vessel, exactly. What do you think is going to happen? What we see, exactly. The issue is whether he can have anything, exactly. If the blasphemer is killed to death, put to death instantly, in that sense, though, we can blame ourselves for the perverse context. We are permitting it in some way. If he cannot have a vessel, how can he do anything? In that sense, though, if the person is talking about nearly any other topic, though, it must be because we don't care about any number of subjects. When we look at the type of rational calculation that is necessary for this type of context, it has to do with any number of deterrent topics. When we look at any number of subjects, though, it has to be that if we fail to apply the law, perverse things will happen. What we are seeing in the context is things of that nature, but if we talk about something else, though, it has to do with whether we care that any number of subjects are satanic. In that sense, a very reasoning by itself that tries to come up with something separate is something called any number of topics. If we look at the appropriate way, though, the appropriate way must be as we were told. In that sense, we cannot come up with our own deterrents, exactly. When we look at an appropriate topic, it has to be because the context is like that. So in that sense, a person has to say the appropriate methodology was outlined by God. Number one, he's the one who provides the appropriate deterrent. In that sense, though, when we do talk about deterrence theory, it is that. The issue is whether a perverse person can tell us about a theory, exactly. When someone is talking about nearly any topic, we all understand the subject in that sense, but a person can say it has to do with whether or not the person is trained in the subject, exactly. If we talk about that, though, then the person would understand what the right topics are and so on. In that sense, God is never removed from anything. We talked about that earlier. In that sense, when we talk about nearly any topic, though, it has to do with whether or not a person finally understands that we do not have to cater to a perverse person. In that sense, though, if someone wants to imagine topics, whatever they talk about, who cares about that? When we look at an appropriate topic, it has to do with whether we can apply deterrence. When we look at the application of deterrence, that is not the issue. The issue is the deterrent itself. If we have the appropriate deterrent, the issues are nothing. If the person says the deterrent is any number of topics, it has to do with things we don't care about. When we look at the theoretical perspective, it's whether a perverse person can instruct us, exactly. In that sense, though, when we do look at an appropriate topic, it must be because when we look at the appropriate theory, it has to do with God providing the appropriate deterrence. And when we look at deterrence theory, it has to do with any number of subjects we've been talking about. When a human being is in any kind of context, we cannot trust a human being to tell us any number of subjects. We don't know what's inside the human being. That is the big issue. When we talk about mens rea, for example, the issue is whether anyone can know what's inside the human being, though. Impossible. That is the whole problem. When someone is in a particular topic, though, the person tries to infer a mens rea. Inference is that. No one can actually go inside and know what's going on in the human being. The person purports to do that, though, and we're not saying that by itself is not a good thing. But what we're saying is, can anyone know exactly? But when we talk about the particular topic, though, it's as if we can know the mens rea of anything. If we look at anything in particular, though, it has to do with whether we even know that mens rea is a perverse concept, exactly. The idea that we can know impossible, exactly. What we can't know is that. The issue is whether that topic is by itself evidence of the very thing we're talking about. When something wants to be psychoanalyzed, exactly. In that sense, what the Lord said about that topic is something very basic, though. Who cares about Satan's topics? The issue is when it's perverse, kill it, exactly. In that sense, though, the issue is whether it's annoying topics. Its topics are that. It's a sick being. We don't need to know about its topics. In that sense, what I try to tell the person is something very basic, though. When we want to psychoanalyze something that's sick, let us know. The whole concept of that is that it wants to be worshipped in that way, exactly. But what do we care about the topic? The rule is if it's perverse, it's dead. In that sense, though, if the person is talking about a particular topic, though, we're talking about whether or not deterrence by itself is a subject in that sense. If the thing exists, someone is permitting it, correct. But if we're talking about something different, though, it has to do with whether we finally not cater to the perverse person. In that sense, though, if the person is talking about nearly any topic, it's whether a human being can finally talk about a topic without having to cater to a perverse person. In that sense, though, if the person is talking about nearly any topic, it has to do with basic subjects that everyone knows at this point. If the person says it is about the normal topic, then we know that. But let's say when we talk about nearly any topic, a rational person has the right to talk about any topic. The issue has to do with nothing else. Issue is whether we want to cater to a perverse person. When we are in a particular topic, though, it has to do with whether that's not obvious. A human being could talk about infinite subjects, exactly. The capacity of the human being to understand as something proven. The issue is whether we want to cater to a perverse person. In that sense, though, what we try to tell the person is something very basic, though. If a person is in any kind of context, what we are talking about is whether or not it's required to talk about topics that we do not care about. Why do we need to know that topic exactly? It has to do with the act, correct? In that sense, though, if the person is committing the evil act, we'll assume that it's an evil being that we don't know. We don't know what it is, exactly. Part of the intention is thought. When we have something that has those type of intentions against a human being, why do we care about its topics, exactly? In that sense, though, when we do look at a particular topic, it has to do with whether we care about its subjects. In that sense, who cares about any of its topics? We're looking at the act itself, exactly. When we look at the perverse distinction, though, exactly, when we look at anything in particular, it has to do with basic things like that. We do have a concept of design, but that's something different. If someone is, exactly, when someone does something in terms of a particular topic, again, it's whether we want to cater to the perverse person. In that sense, when we talk about nearly any topic, it must be based on what we see with the individual. Exactly. But if the individual is talking about things no one cares about, though, it must be for different reasons. If a person says when we talk about the actus reus, but it's not about that. We're talking about what the being is intending, though. When we look at intention, exactly. If something is going so far as to do any number of topics, it must have worser intentions, and we don't care about that. The issue is whether or not a human being spends the time to talk to something that's not evil, exactly. In that sense, when we look at an appropriate topic, the topic is that if something commits an act, a particular act, it must have done it for any number of reasons. But what we tell you about the particular act is something completely different. If someone stutters, it must, exactly, but in that sense, what I try to tell persons about a topic is something very basic. When anyone is in any kind of context, it has to do with whether we care about the being's intentions per se. Exactly. If someone is talking about a different topic, though, what we care about is what the being does. If it commits an act of that nature, it has to do with whether we could have prevented it, correct? When we look at any standard for preventing anything, it must be based on what we know about the subject, which is the human being has any number of topics. We talk about the human being. When we look at whatever's out there, who cares, exactly? When we look at the human being has any number of topics, and we talked about that. If it cannot even bring itself to talk about the topic, exactly. In that sense, though, the issue is whether the being is deterred from that act. When we talk about deterrence, exactly. In that sense, though, when we talk about nearly any particular topic, our analysis must be what we know about the subject. If the thing makes certain types of topics, it cannot have any number of ways to do that, exactly. In that sense, though, we know what we're talking about in that regard. We must be talking about the ability to tell the thing what the consequence is exactly. In that sense, though, we cannot make that type of estimation for a bit exactly. In that sense, who cares about anyone's topic? When we have a particular society, it's no different, though. If the individual was dealing with the same topic, it had to be for that very reason, but why do we care about any number of topics? If the individual is present, it can be dead, correct? In that sense, we don't care about that topic. What we care about is what we know. In that sense, we must be analyzing something we call a number of topics, but who cares about that? If the individual is talking about nearly any topic, it must be talking about things we are well acquainted with in that sense. So in the next one, we'll talk about that.